Rain tapped the courthouse windows before dawn. The air smelled like wet stone and burnt coffee. I carried a file so heavy it bent in my hand. On mornings like that, truth usually arrived already bruised. If you know what it feels like to be judged before you speak, stay with me. Some stories do not shout. They just sit down and break your heart slowly. By 9, the courtroom had filled with damp coats and tired faces. The heater clicked, sighed, and gave up like an old man. Gray light pressed against the windows and flattened every color in the room. My clerk stacked papers with the soft care of someone folding hospital sheets. Even the benches seemed to wait for bad news. The file before me carried a number that made the whole room feel colder. The city wanted $75,000 from one homeowner, not for stealing, not for hurting anybody, not for some wild act in the dark. It came from yard fines, porch fines, storage fines, code fines, and daily late charges. Those small cuts had been added together for months. That is how paperwork hunts people. One rule at a time, one fee at a time, until a house starts looking easier to take than save. The top photo clipped to the file showed a tired little house. The paint was peeling off the porch rail in long strips. Tall grass leaned against the front steps like it wanted to come inside. One gutter sagged at the corner. A van sat beside the porch with one flat tire and a broken mirror. People always think a picture tells the truth. It does not. A picture catches a moment. It does not tell you what happened the night before. It does not tell you who was sick, who was dying, or who had no sleep. I have sat on that bench for more than 30 years, long enough to know shame has a sound before it has a face. It comes in slow steps. It comes in held breath. It comes in the silence after a name is called out loud. That morning, the hallway outside had a mean little buzz to it. Some people had come hoping for a show, a loud woman, a dirty house, a reason to feel better about themselves before lunch. Then my clerk called Karen Doyle and the door opened. Karen Doyle was a big woman, but size was not the first thing I noticed. I noticed strain. Her cardigan pulled tight across her chest and stomach. One button near the middle was missing. She kept one hand over that gap all the way to the table. Her blouse had tiny blue flowers on white cloth. It had been ironed once, then worn too many times after that. Her hair was cut neat at the jaw, but silver roots had pushed through. Not careless silver, the kind that shows up when money runs out before worry does. Her cheeks were red from climbing the courthouse stairs. She took short breaths, then held them, then took them again. Mascara had settled beneath one eye like a tired shadow. She held her purse against her ribs as if it could stop a blow. She did not look angry yet. She looked ready to be hurt. Her hands told me even more. The knuckles were cracked and pale from soap and cold water. Her nails were cut short, uneven, and clean. A gold band hung from a chain at her neck. She rubbed that ring each time the city lawyer shuffled his papers. Her shoes were cheap black flats split near both big toes. Rain had darkened the hem of her slacks. The right knee carried an old bleach stain. One ankle bulged over the shoe line. She stood like every joint in her body had argued with her on the way there. The city sent Martin Hale to speak for them. He wore a navy suit with a sharp crease down each leg. His tie was straight. His glasses were spotless, and his folder was thin. He stood like a man who trusted printed lines more than living people. Not cruel, just certain. Martin Hale began with dates, totals, and violation photos. Unsafe porch steps, trash accumulation, loose siding, dead grass, an unregistered van stored beside the house for too long. He showed 8 months of city pictures. He listed warning letters, inspection dates, mailed notices, and daily penalties. His voice never rose above a careful office tone. That almost made it worse. Calm numbers can be colder than angry words. When I asked Karen Doyle if she understood the city's claim, she nodded too fast. When I asked if she wanted to answer it, her first words tripped over each other. Martin Hale asked her to keep to the facts. I told her to slow down and breathe. She looked at me with a face full of fear and heat. Then she snapped, "Judge Judy Whitmore, maybe you should calm your hormones and let me talk." The room froze so hard I heard the flag rope tap the pole. My bailiff shifted one foot. Martin Hale almost smiled, then stopped himself. I did not reach for my gavel. I have seen pain wear ugly clothes before. I looked at Karen Doyle after the words fell. Her mouth was trembling like she had bitten through a scream. That mattered more to me than the insult. I asked her to put both hands on the table. She tried, but her right hand would not open all the way. A burn scar crossed the center of her palm, shiny and new. I asked where she got it. She looked down and told me the first truth. 3 months earlier, an outlet in her kitchen wall had sparked and caught fire. She said it happened 2 days after city crews dug up the street for utility work. She threw wet towels on the flames and burned her hand. Then she pulled her husband's oxygen line through the smoke. Martin Hale glanced down at his notes for the first time. The city had fined her for dangerous fire damage 1 week after that. Their photo called it owner-caused hazard. Karen Doyle said nobody had come inside to ask what happened. Nobody checked the power complaint from her block. Nobody asked why the wall was black or why her hand was wrapped. Let me ask you something. How often do we hear one ugly sentence and decide we know a whole person? How often do we stop listening right before the truth starts speaking? If you have ever done that, you are not alone. But stay with me now. I turned to the photo of the van beside the porch. Martin Hale called it abandoned storage. Karen Doyle stared at the picture until her lips went thin. Then she said the van had a wheelchair lift in the back. Her husband Frank used that lift after his stroke. She said Frank Doyle died in that van after dialysis, not years ago, not on some distant road. He died in the passenger seat at a red light with her hand on his shoulder. She still had his crossword book in the door pocket. She had not been able to sell it. She said the seatbelt still smelled like peppermint oil from his chest rub. Sugar packets from hospital coffee were still under the visor. The city began charging storage penalties 9 days after his funeral. Martin Hale stopped looking at Karen Doyle and looked down at the edge of the table. The room had grown very still. Then I picked up the porch photo marked worst violation. Boxes, bags, 2 plastic tubs, and a broken crib frame crowded the front steps. Martin Hale called it a public nuisance. That means the city says your mess is spilling into other people's peace. I asked Karen Doyle why the crib was there. She swallowed twice before the next truth came out. Her daughter had left 2 children on her porch last winter. One boy was 6. The baby girl was 16 months old. The crib frame came from a shelter that closed early in a storm. Karen Doyle said this happened while Frank was dying in the next room. She was sleeping in a chair by his bed and waking every hour. Then, after he passed, the children stayed because nobody else took them. The city photo of the messy porch was taken the morning after his funeral. She said she had not even cut the hospital band from her wrist yet. I looked closer at the date stamp on the picture. It matched the death notice tucked later in the file. I asked if she had proof the children were placed with her. Her hands shook as she opened her purse. She brought out papers folded so many times they felt like cloth. There were temporary guardianship forms with a county seal. There was a baby medicine sheet with fever doses written in blue pen. There was a school note for the little boy, Mateo. There was a funeral home receipt. There was a grocery list on the back of one page. That last detail nearly undid me. People do not fake a grocery list in the middle of grief. They write milk, apples, cough syrup, and bread because children still wake up hungry. That is what real struggle looks like. Not neat, not planned, just alive and trying. That was the moment the room changed. Not with noise, with faces. The people who had come to watch a rude woman with a dirty porch were now looking at a widow, a grandmother, a woman carrying too many lives in 2 worn-out hands. I asked Martin Hale if the city record showed Frank Doyle's death date. He said that detail was not relevant to the violations. I asked if the record showed the emergency placement of the children. He said hardship does not erase noncompliance. I asked if the city had entered her hardship papers into review. For the first time, his voice lost its clean office edge. He said he did not know. That answer matters in my courtroom, because when the government says pay or lose your house, it must know the full truth, not just the part that helps it collect money. I asked my clerk for the packet buried in the back sleeve of the file. It had been stamped received 6 months earlier. The date was plain. The city had her papers the whole time. Hospital records, a death notice, guardianship forms. There were also 3 repair requests Karen Doyle had filed. One for the porch rail, one for emergency electrical help, one asking for more time due to caregiving and funeral costs. Every request was sitting there in the file. Every one of them had gone nowhere. Then I found the utility report. The week before the kitchen fire, city crews had cut into the curb line beside her house. The report noted a power surge complaint from her block that same night. Martin Hale had not brought that page forward. I held it up and watched his face change, not into guilt, into embarrassment. We then reviewed body camera footage from the code officer. The clip opened on a gray afternoon with wind pushing plastic across the porch. Rain dripped from a bent gutter onto the steps. Karen Doyle opened the door wearing hospital socks and a paper wristband. Behind her, a little boy held a cereal bowl with both hands. A baby cried from somewhere deeper in the house. Karen Doyle said, "Please, just 1 week." She said, "The funeral is Friday and the baby has a fever." She asked where to send the hardship forms. She asked if the fines could be paused. The officer marked the visit as owner refused cooperation. I watched the clip again, then once more. She never refused. She asked for instructions. She asked for time. She asked for help in the plainest words a person can use. Stay with me here, because this is where a clock becomes a weapon. One missed note, one careless box left blank, one worker in a rush, and a woman can lose her home while holding a sick baby. Martin Hale cleared his throat and returned to the rules. He said notices were legally served. He said penalties continue until conditions are corrected. He said officers cannot stop charges based on sympathy alone. He was right about the words. He was wrong about the meaning. I told him the law is not supposed to be a trapdoor. It is supposed to be a bridge. If the city receives proof of death, illness, guardianship, and repair requests, it must act in good faith. That means it must deal honestly. It must not behave like a machine. Good faith means you do not keep charging a widow as if grief were a choice. It means you do not call a van abandoned when it still carries a dead man's last ride. It means you do not treat emergency custody like yard clutter. It means you do not ignore stamped papers because they are messy and late. It means you see the person before you seize the property. Martin Hale said rules protect fairness for everybody. If one homeowner gets grace, others will ask for the same. I told him grace is not favoritism when the facts support it. It is judgment. And judgment is the reason a human being sits on this bench. If this is getting under your skin, do not turn away. This is how people lose everything while others call it procedure. This is why details matter. This is why one question asked at the right time can save a life. Hold on with me. I lifted the hardship packet so the room could see it. The paper shook in my hand, not from age, from anger. The city had the truth in its own file and still chose the cleaner story. I let that silence sit where everyone could feel it. Then I spoke slowly so nobody could hide inside my words. The city's demand for $75,000 was not supported by fair process. The penalties tied to the van were dismissed. The porch and yard penalties were suspended and then dismissed. The lien placed against Karen Doyle's home was removed. The city was ordered to review her repair requests within 10 business days. The fire charges were struck while the utility report was investigated. The guardianship period was to be treated as hardship time. No further daily penalties could run during that review. My gavel came down once. Not hard, just clear. The sound moved through the wood like a door opening in a locked house. Karen Doyle did not gasp. She did not cheer. She simply stopped gripping her purse. Her fingers opened one by one. Deep red marks stayed in her palm where the strap had cut her skin. Her shoulders dropped, but only halfway, as if her body did not trust relief yet. Then she bowed over the table and stayed there. I could see Frank Doyle's ring swing beneath her collar. It tapped softly against the edge of the table. When she looked up, her face had changed in a small human way. Not younger, not prettier, just less hunted. I asked if the children were safe that morning. She nodded and said the neighbor downstairs was watching them. I told my clerk to wait after court. I wanted Karen Doyle linked with the city hardship office before she left the building. I wanted copies made of every paper inside that purse. Some mercy needs paperwork if it is going to last. I also wanted a housing counselor called. I wanted her repair requests walked upstairs by hand. A good ruling can stop harm for a day. A good follow-through can stop it for a year. Then I did something I rarely do from that bench. I asked Karen Doyle to remain standing. I told her she was wrong to speak to me the way she did, but I also told her one foolish sentence does not erase a whole life of burden. The room listened harder then. Do not let shame teach those children how to see themselves. That is what I told her. Her chin trembled once. She nodded as if the words hurt and healed at the same time. Some lessons land quietly. Then a voice rose from the back bench. A man in a brown work shirt stood before anyone called on him. He looked about 60 with paint on his cuffs and a lunch cooler by his foot. He said his name was Luis Benitez. He said he lived next door to Karen Doyle. He told the room Karen had brought soup to his wife for 11 weeks during chemo. He said she drove that wife to treatment in the same unregistered van. He said the tall grass grew because Karen had been cutting 2 yards by herself. He said the bags on the porch held donated coats for 3 children nearby. Then he sat down fast, embarrassed by his own courage. If something tender just moved inside you, stay there for a moment. Courtrooms are built from hard benches, hard rules, and harder memories. But mercy can sit there too. Sometimes it arrives in a neighbor's work shirt. Sometimes it gets there just in time. Karen Doyle whispered, "Thank you, but not to me first." She turned toward Luis Benitez, then toward my clerk, then toward the empty space beside her where grief had been standing all morning. When she thanked me last, I believed it. 2 weeks later, a short clip from that hearing spread far beyond our county. Not the insult, not the gavel. The part people shared showed Karen Doyle losing the lean and nearly losing her balance with relief. By Monday afternoon, my clerk had counted 417 letters. By Friday, there were 83 grocery cards tucked inside a banker box. A roofer offered free labor if someone would cover shingles. A church sent 26 winter coats in children's sizes. A retired electrician wrote that he would repair the burned kitchen wall for nothing. People were finally reading the whole story. One woman mailed $37 and a note of apology. She said she had laughed at Karen Doyle's haircut in the first clip. Then she watched the full hearing. She wrote that she had been widowed too. She knew what it meant to sound rude when you were really drowning. The strangest wave of mail came from strangers fighting the same system. 72 people sent copies of their own city fines, broken fences, overgrown grass, storage notices, warnings posted while someone inside the home was dying. My chambers could not solve all of that pain. No courtroom can. But for 1 week, the mail proved people were paying attention. And attention is where help begins. Silence is where people disappear without a sound. A local fundraiser started without Karen Doyle asking for it. In 9 days, it reached $12,684, not enough to buy a new life, enough to fix a porch, clear the yard, register the van, and buy 2 bunk beds. Luis Benitez gathered volunteers for 6 straight Saturdays. Martin Hale, to his credit, helped move her repair permits faster after that hearing. He also sent corrected city records and a letter admitting the hardship packet had been mishandled. That mattered to me. People should be allowed to learn in public, too, even the ones who trusted the wrong page first. 6 months later, Karen Doyle came back through the same courtroom door. I knew her before the clerk spoke her name. The stretched cardigan was gone. So were the split flats. She wore dark jeans, clean white sneakers, and a green sweater that fit her shoulders. Her hair was still cut at the jaw, but now the silver belonged there. It had been brushed into the style instead of fought. Her cheeks were still full. Her body was still large. But she carried herself like a woman living inside her own life again. The first time I saw her, every step looked borrowed. Now her feet met the floor like they had a right to be there. Her eyes still held sorrow. Some losses keep their own room forever. But fear had moved out of the front seat. That was clear. Her hands had changed too. The burn scar remained, but it looked softer and less angry. Her nails were trimmed smooth. Frank Doyle's ring no longer hung from a chain. It sat on her right hand beside a fresh little nick from work. She smiled when she saw me notice that ring. Not a wide smile, not one for the room. A private smile, the kind a person wears when survival finally stops feeling like theft. That smile told me more than any speech could. She had brought Mateo with her. He was 7 now and missing one front tooth. He held a paper with both hands and stood so straight it almost hurt to watch. The drawing showed a blue house, a van, 2 bunk beds, and a woman in green. Across the top, he had written, "We stayed." Karen Doyle told me she now worked the morning shift in the school lunch kitchen, close enough to walk home if Mateo got sick. Her granddaughter slept through the night in her own bed. The porch had been repaired. The grass had been cut. Tomato plants sat in buckets near the steps. The van was registered and running. Luis Benitez had taught her how to change the oil. She said Frank had always wanted a garden by the porch rail. Now the children watered the plants before dinner. She said the little girl liked to pat the tomato leaves and smell her hands. That detail stayed with me. So let me ask you this before I tell you what remained with me after the room emptied. What kind of place would we live in if more people chose repair over ridicule? What if more neighbors spoke before a house was taken? What if more offices read every page before pushing send? What if we stopped turning one bad moment into a whole identity? That evening, after the last bench emptied, I sat alone in chambers. The rain had come back. It traced the window the same way it had on that first morning. I thought about Karen Doyle. I thought about Luis Benitez. I thought about a child writing the words, "We stayed." I also thought about Mateo's drawing folded on my desk, blue house, green sweater, 2 small beds. Children do not waste crayons on symbols. They draw what they fear losing. When a child draws home after danger, he is not making art. He is making a record of what almost vanished from his life. People think this job is about deciding who wins. It is not. It is about seeing clearly enough to stop harm from dressing itself up as order. Every file holds a house. Every house holds a table. Every table holds names, medicine, old rings, and children's bowls. When the law forgets that, it becomes a blade. When it remembers, it can become a hand. I have worn this robe a long time. Long enough to know justice is rarely loud. It is often a tired woman getting one more week. It is often a neighbor standing up. It is a clerk making one phone call after court. It is a city forced to look again. It is a little boy who gets to sleep in his own room. It is a grandmother who no longer walks like bad news is waiting at the door. It is the quiet return of ordinary life. I have seen every kind of anger in a courtroom. I have seen lies dressed up as tears. I have seen pride wreck people who could have been saved by one honest word. But I have also seen strangers become witnesses for mercy. That is why I still listen past the first mistake. Because pain rarely enters politely. Grief is not neat. Fear does not speak in perfect order. And dignity can look rough around the edges when it has not slept. If we forget that, we do not just fail the law, we fail each other. That is what the file taught me. Not that Karen Doyle was innocent in every detail. The porch was a mess, the yard was overgrown, the van did sit too long, but truth is larger than a list of flaws. A real court must hold both things at once. The fact that a rule was broken and the fact that a human life may be breaking too. If we cannot do that, then the robe is only cloth and the bench is only wood. So when I turned off my lamp that night, I did not think about the insult anymore. I did not think about hormones, raised voices, or the gossip that had filled the hallway. I thought about the moment her fingers unclenched from that purse strap. I thought about relief arriving so late it looked almost painful. I thought about how close she came to losing home. Some people leave court with money. Some leave with punishment. A few leave with time. Time to fix a step. Time to bury the dead. Time to feed a child and sleep one full night. Those gifts do not fit neatly on paper, but they matter. Sometimes the holiest thing a court can give is breathing room, not forever, just enough for a life to stand back up. That day, that was justice. And when I locked my chambers and walked into the rain, I knew this much. The law cannot love people. Only people can do that. So every day I take that bench, I ask one quiet question. Will I see the paper first or the person? I thought about how close disaster had come to looking official. A stamp, a signature, a delayed review, and a widow nearly became a caution sign. Not because she was dangerous, because she was tired, loud, heavy, grieving, and easy to dismiss from far away. That is another truth people really do not like. The folks most in need of mercy rarely arrive polished enough to invite it. On my best days, I remember in time. And on the days I do, somebody keeps their house. Some child keeps a bed. Some widow keeps one more piece of the world from being taken. That is enough for me. It has to be.